As the Straw Hats ride down Reverse Mountain into the Grand Line, a huge whale appears in front of them. With the helm still broken, they are about to crash into it, but Luffy fires a cannon, sufficiently slowing the ship, just breaking his beloved seat, the ship's sheep figurehead. Infuriated, Luffy punches the whale, who swallows the Straw Hats and their ship as he submerges. In the last second, Luffy notices a door on top of the whale and winds up in some sort of passageway. His crew finds itself in front of a small island in the middle of green waters with a clear blue sky overhead. There they encounter Crocus, the whale's caretaker, who painted the inside of its stomach to look like the sky. Suddenly everything starts to shake as Laboon, which is the name of the whale, rams its head against the red line and Crocus leaves to give Laboon a sedative. Meanwhile, Luffy and two individuals crash into the whale's stomach. As Crocus returns, they shot two cannonballs from their bazookas to rip a hole in the whale's stomach, but Crocus takes the cannonballs with his own body and Luffy knocks them both out. Leading the Straw Hats out of the whale, Crocus explains that Laboon is a whale with a heart like a person, who has been waiting for a certain group of pirates for 50 years. While guiding them out of the giant whale Laboon, its caretaker Crocus tells the whale's story to the Straw Hats, that it was left behind by a group of pirates when they began their journey through the Grand Line and abandoned when they fled through one of the calm belts, and that once he told Laboon what had happened, the whale started ramming its head against the red line, not believing what Crocus said because that would mean losing its reason to wait. After hearing that, Luffy picks a fight with the whale before he declares it to be a draw and promises to return to finish the fight. Nami tries to plot a course, but is unable to do so because her compass does not point in a single direction. Crocus explains how the Grand Line is navigated and that a log pose is needed. In return for helping Laboon, he gives them one, and the Straw Hats set sail for Whiskey Peak, the hometown of Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday, whom they are taking along. The weather changes rapidly on the first leg of their journey. Nami has to adjust to the thought of having to watch the log pose constantly while the rest of the crew and their passengers work hard to keep the ship afloat. As they arrive at their destination, the townspeople greet them warmly and throw a party in their honor. When eventually the crew falls asleep from exhaustion, the townspeople, who are really bounty hunters of the secret organization Baroque Works, plan on capturing them. However, Zoro only faked falling asleep and takes on the group of roughly 100 hunters on his own. Nami, who faked falling asleep as well, searches the town for the bounty hunters' treasures. Meanwhile, Zoro lets loose on the bounty hunters the two new swords he received in Louge Town, Yubashiri and Sandai Kitetsu. After he defeats all of them, including the frontier agents Mr. 9, Miss Wednesday, Mr. 8, and Miss Monday, a new threat arrives, that being the Baroque Works officer agents Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine. Their mission is to eliminate two traitors, who know the true identity of the organization's boss Mr. 0. They reveal them to be Mr. 8, who is really Igaram, captain of the Royal Army of the Kingdom of Alabasta, and Miss Wednesday, who is actually Alabasta's crown princess, Nefertari Vivi. Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine follow after Vivi, who attempts to flee the island. Mr. 9, despite learning Vivi's a traitor, tries to protect her but is beaten. Igaram, no longer able to fight himself, begs Zoro to save her, but Zoro refuses. As the Alabastan soldier promises a handsome reward, Nami chimes in. She first extorts Igaram to raise the amount, then she extorts Zoro to save the princess. Miss Monday also decides to try and protect Vivi, but is quickly beaten by Mr. 5's bomb fruit powers that allow him to create explosions from any part of his body, and Miss Valentine's kilo fruit powers which allow her to change her weight from 1 to 10,000 kilograms. When Zoro is about to take on Vivi's assailants, Luffy appears. Oblivious to the townsfolk's occupation as bounty hunters. He wants to fight Zoro for cutting them all up, and unable to convince Luffy of the truth, Zoro fights him. The officer agents attempt to get past the fighting crewmates, but are caught up in the struggle and easily defeated. Luffy and Zoro are about to go all out, when Nami arrives and violently ends their duel. Out of imminent danger, Vivi explains that Baroque Works is responsible for inciting a rebellion in her home country, which is why she cannot offer a large reward, and reveals that Mr. Zero's true identity is Sir Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Unfortunately, two Baroque Works spies see this and capture pictures of Luffy, Zoro and Nami, making them Baroque Works' top targets. Nevertheless, Luffy agrees to take her with them and Igaram sets out on the direct route to Alabasta, as a decoy. As he clears the coast, his ship is engulfed in an explosion. The Straw Hats and Vivi hurry to their ship and set sail, following the log towards Little Garden. Miss All Sunday, the partner of Mr. Zero, appears on their ship. Without explaining her reasons, she offers the crew an eternal pose. However, Luffy crushes it and the agent leaves them. Koby and Helmeppo have enlisted into the Navy as oddjobbers and they work hard towards their goal of becoming officers. They get into an argument about whether it is possible, which escalates into a struggle and they accidentally fire a cannon, destroying a whole building. Later they are taken along on a trip to turn over Helmeppo's father, the former Navy captain, Axehand Morgan, to Vice Admiral Garp to stand trial for his crimes. While receiving the prisoner, Garp falls asleep and Morgan slashes the Admiral's chest, takes Helmeppo hostage and by stealing a boat, he makes a run for his life. The Marines are about to fire at them when Koby steps in front of the cannon. He pleads for his friend's life and jumps into the water to swim after them. Impressed with Koby risking dismissal from the Navy and thus his dream, Helmeppo stands up to his father. Eventually Morgan throws them overboard and Garp, who witnessed their struggle, decides to take them with him to the Navy headquarters. Koby and Helmeppo settle in at headquarters, where Garp makes sure that they are not slacking off. After working hard during the day, they fall tired to their beds, but Helmeppo decides that he wants to do more, to regain his former lifestyle. Koby joins him. Starting then, they spend their nights stealing their bodies and training the martial arts. Eventually, Garp overhears that they are friends with Straw Hat Luffy, who was recently added to the wanted list and puts their determination to the test by letting them fight him. Though he is disappointed by their weakness, he decides to keep their friendship with Luffy a secret, allowing them to stay. As the Straw Hats sail toward Little Garden, the Baroque Works officer agents Mr. 3 and his partner Miss Golden Week receive new orders. Finally arriving there, the Straw Hats find the island to be populated by oversized and from prehistoric times stemming animals. Frightened, Nami and Usopp stay behind on the ship as the others spread out to search the island. Nami remembers having read about the island in a book, but by the time she finds it, it is already too late. A giant approaches through the forest. The giant introduces himself as Broggy, claiming to be the strongest warrior of Elbaf, and asks Nami and Usopp for booze. Frightened, the two play dead and Broggy takes them to his place, where he roasts dinosaur meat to treat them as his guests. They however, fearing to be eaten themselves, try to escape through the jungle but after being chased by large predators. They end up back at Broggy's camp. Elsewhere, Luffy and Vivi meet Dory, another giant and Broggy's rival, who tells them that they are engaged in a 100-years-long duel. Whenever the island's central volcano erupts, the two face each other in combat. Meanwhile in the jungle, the Mr. 5 pair joins forces with Mr. 3, who plots to earn the giant's huge bounties. Usopp, who is immensely impressed with the giant's fight, decides to strive to be like them and starts calling Broggy his master. After their fight, which like thousands before it, ends in a draw, Dory receives 2 barrels of booze from Broggy, which he obtained from Nami and Usopp. Unbeknown to the 4, the contents of one of the barrels is made to explode by Mr. 5. When Dory later drinks it and it badly injures him from within, he accuses the Straw Hats. Left with no choice, Luffy fights the weakened giant and knocks him out. However, by the time of the next eruption of the center volcano, Dory gets back up and heads into battle, knowing his chances to be bad. Before he leaves to face his rival and friend for a last time, Dory traps Luffy under a huge rock. While the giants fight, Nami and Usopp try to cross the jungle to meet up with Luffy and Vivi at Dory's camp. Once again fleeing from a hungry dinosaur, Nami is distracted by a life-sized facsimile of Luffy and captivated by Mr. 3's wax fruit powers, which allow him to generate wax, and Zoro is captured in a similar way. Usopp arrives alone at Dory's camp, shortly followed by Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine. The giants' manipulated duel ends in defeat for Dory. Broggy, who stands in tears over the lifeless body of his friend, is addressed by Mr. 3, who already encased the giant's feet in iron-hard wax. Mr. 5 captures Vivi, while his partner stomps Usopp chest deep into the ground. After explosively beating down on the still-trapped Luffy, Mr. 5 and his partner take Vivi to the giant's duel site, where Mr. 3 is busy further restraining Broggy with his wax. Mr. 3 creates a large cake-shaped pedestal upon which Vivi, Nami, and Zoro are placed. He then explains to Broggy how he manipulated their duel, causing the giant to burst out in anger and break his restraints. However, before he can completely free himself, Mr. 5 knocks the giant out with several explosions and Mr. 3 renews the restraints. Meanwhile, Karu, Vivi's ostrich-sized duck, digs out Luffy from under the rock. The bird, Luffy, and Usopp arrive at the scene just as Zoro attempts to free himself by cutting off his legs. Mr. 3 is unsettled that Zoro and Nami seem to be completely carefree since Luffy's arrival. Usopp and Karu face Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, but instead of fighting, they let themselves be chased through the jungle. Luffy tries to destroy the wax pedestal, threatening the lives of his friends, while Mr. 3 fights to keep it intact. Once Luffy sent the officer agent flying into the jungle, the captives find Luffy unwilling to help them, because Mr. 3's partner, Miss Golden Week, has him firmly under control with her emotion-inducing paintings. Unable to catch Karu and Usopp, Mr. 5 resolves to use his newest piece of equipment, a revolver, which he loads with his explosive breath. Once back at the pedestal, Usopp finds Luffy drinking tea with Miss Golden Week, while their friends are already completely covered in wax. He burns Luffy's shirt, upon which Miss Golden Week had painted, using a flaming projectile. Luffy, again himself, attempts to destroy the pedestal but is interrupted by the returning Mr. 3, who creates himself a waxen battle suit. Usopp is finally struck down by Mr. 5's explosive shots, but is still able to make Karu run around the pedestal, dragging behind it a rope. Luffy then grabs Mr. 3 at his burning, tree-shaped hairdo and uses it to inflame the rope, burning the large wax structure and freeing the others. As they emerge from the flames, Nami and Vivi defeat Miss Valentine and Zoro makes quick work of Mr. 5. Luffy and Karu chase after Mr. 3 and his partner and defeat them respectively. Meanwhile, Sanji stumbles upon Mr. 3's hideout, where he receives a call from Mr. 0. Once Sanji realizes that he is talking to Crocodile, he pretends being Mr. 3 and convinces the warlord that he has eliminated Vivi and her Straw Hat escort. During the conversation, Crocodile's messengers, the Otter, and its partner, the Vulture, called the Unluckies, arrive to deliver an eternal pose, leading to Alabasta, to Mr. 3. They attack Sanji, but he defeats them. To justify the noisy interruption, Sanji tells Mr. 0 that one of the Straw Hats was still alive. Crocodile tells him to return to Alabasta, then, after the conversation, orders Mr. 2 to intercept and eliminate Mr. 3 en route for his failure to make accurate reports. While Broggy creates a rainfall of tears, Dory wakes up and concludes that after 100 years, Broggy's axe had gotten dull and only knocked him out. Using the eternal pose to guide them, the crew sets sail. Dory and Broggy see them off, and to thank them, sacrifice their worn-out weapons to kill a giant goldfish as it attempts to feed on the Straw Hat's ship.